Hi, my name is Ann Ernst. I'm the editor of Cupertino Patch, and we are working today with 3 students from Monta Vista High School, and this is Job Shadow Day. We are conducting an interview with Mayor Orrin Mahoney. We will let Mr. Mahoney take it away, and we'll start grilling him after that.
Well, that's right. I'm mic'd up myself. I don't need that mic. So yeah, I just want to start out a little bit with a little. I've done a couple of career day things, and I think one of the good things to start with a little bit about government, and we'll talk a little more about our specific government here, but with what your idea is why we have governments, and particularly local government. What do you think the functions of government are? Any ideas?
Well, first of all, my name is Yashashri. Nice to meet you. I'm a junior at Monta Vista High School. So this question, I think, is something that we try to touch upon even in our, history classes and literature classes at school, and something that as students and between the teacher we kind of dwindle down to is government is like the basic form or voice of democracy within the city, and for our purposes, Cupertino. But it's just a way that the citizens of the community can keep a check and maintain kind of relationships and have kind of like a positive communication and collaboration with like officials who are there to actually address their grievances or problems and issues, and who actually have the power of getting those voices across to people who can make a difference.
That's definitely a role of communication. But why do we have to have a city government in Cupertino?
I think it's to establish some sort of like order in the city, and like to keep people balanced, and so that everything runs smoothly in the city itself. Yeah.
Anything else? I think that is. I'll come back to that because that's the thing that people don't think about. They think about the other thing first, of why government's here. But any services that people get from government?
I think the government, I'm Karen, and I'm from Monta Vista too, and I'm a freshman. So I think the government, it provides a lot of, overall services for the city, such as, cleaning the streets and schools and all of that. And without the government, then the people would have to kind of decide for themselves how to do it. And it's kind of hard to do that without, one central person or, group of people governing it.
No, I think you're right. So I look at the city level. There are the 2 basic areas. One is providing services that otherwise they'd have to either provide for themselves individually, which are hard to do, or group together in some ways to do it. Paving the streets, traffic lights, parks, all kinds of other services like that people need, other infrastructure services that they may need. And by forming a government, or governments get formed, everybody gets to pay for those services. Some services are still for fee, like we have our, in our Park and Recs department here, we have certain things. If you want to take a class, you pay for that separately. But certain things are, quote, I want to say free for everybody. They're paid for by everybody is really a better term in their taxes, like our parks and our streets and other things. But going back to your point, most people think about the services, but they don't think about that other role, which is basically to establish rules and regulations for people to interface together. So you can't, if you want to build a building, if you wanted to build a shopping center in Cupertino, you couldn't put it in a residential neighborhood. Somebody couldn't put a 5-story house next to your house. So somebody, if they were going to build a new house, has to obey the building permit rules, et cetera, so that the house is safe and the building inspectors come out so that it won't catch fire with bad electrical wiring or whatever. So all of those things are there really to provide an interface between, it's not a service per se, but it's to provide rules and regulations for people to operate together. So I think those are the two things. So we can talk more about how we do that here in Cupertino. You guys have some questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I'm sure you've been to a lot of council meetings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have long ones here.
So how have like the voice of the people or people who speak influence your decisions?
No, I think it's. I mean, it's really interesting. So sometimes people don't believe that. You know, sometimes people think we have our minds made up. We don't. You know, in my experience here in Cupertino, we stay pretty open. So there's a couple things. One is there's something called a Brown Act in the state of California that's very restrictive about how we operate local government. We can't have private meetings. All decision-making meetings have to be in public. They have to be agendized. People have to have the opportunity to speak on any issue they want to speak on. So it's I don't know how it is in other states, but in California it's very open to having the people express their opinion, and we're very open to listening to them. Now, many times people say, if you don't make the decision that they want you to, they say, you didn't listen to me, and we have to be careful about saying, we listened, but we made a different decision, because everything we're trying to do typically comes down to balancing what we feel is right for the city as a whole versus some individual or neighborhood's impact. I was driving over here today, and there was a big thing about cell towers up in Hillsborough, as it turns out. And I mean, that's the classic issue. Everyone wants good cell coverage. People in general don't want a cell tower near their house. Everybody likes trails, but they don't want a trail necessarily near their house. So what we do is balance that. We do, there were many times when after an individual or a group has come in and spoken to us that we change our opinion. You know, we go in. In fact, if we go in saying that we already have our mind made up, you can be excluded from making a decision on that. That's where the law is. So.
Do you have any examples that you could give us?
Yeah, you know, I think that the ultimate, which is really interesting. So we had a project a few years ago that was where the Main Street project is along Stevens Creek Boulevard, and there was there were two housing developments that were coming into the time, and I had just gotten on the council, and they were very controversial because there were quite a few additional housing units in a certain part of town. People don't mind. There are a couple things they don't want about housing. They don't want high density housing. You know, in general, they don't want to go away from kind of the small town atmosphere that we have. All that's somewhat changing. But the biggest issue is schools. People, as you know, people come here for the schools. They value the schools very highly, and there's a feeling, rightly or wrongly, that if one more child goes to my school, it will collapse. And the schools are crowded. Monta Vista is certainly one of the ones that has quite a few students there. They seem to still be delivering a good education even with that crowding, but that's a big issue. So there was a case where we weighed all the input, and we still decided by a 3-2 vote that we would approve that project. The people in that area were so concerned about it that they actually got a number of signatures on the ballot and had what they call a referendum, where that vote got overturned in a vote. So the people really have the ultimate power, either the power of referendum to change a decision or the power of recall to actually remove a council member if they don't think that somebody's doing what they think is the right job. So ultimately the people have a lot of power. One of the interesting things in that particular thing at the time, as you know, Cupertino has a lot of immigrants, and a lot of the people that were impacted were people from, especially from China, and it was a mixed thing. I didn't think they were right. I approved the project, but it was really interesting for them to feel that empowerment that that you don't have in China. And I've been to China many times on Rotary trips. And when the government decides to do something there, they don't have referendums, they don't have big public hearings. They just do it. So for them to feel that empowerment and ultimately, you know, take it to the voters and get it overturned was I thought really neat. Even though and we ended up with, it turns out, I learned from this. While that project got overturned, we ended up with a better project that came later. So I learned that the best project you think is going to happen isn't always the right project in the end, too. So.
And I guess now there's like a flip side to her question. To what extent do you think that your personal experiences kind of influence the things that you try to achieve as mayor of Cupertino?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing, because we really are elected to represent the people. So I have my biases. You know, I do not think we should have banned plastic bags. I think that's creeping nannyism, and I'm not in favor of banning big sodas and whatever the next trendy thing down the pike is. I believe pretty strongly in individual freedom, and I also didn't think that it's really solving any particular problem. A couple of things happened there. One is we were leveraged into doing that by some other government boards that were needed to eliminate things in our wastewater stream. So we kind of were bludgeoned into doing it. But more important than that was, in the end for me, we do a survey every 2 years of all our residents, and one of the questions there was about how many people are already using recyclable bags, and all of that. And I'm doing some of that myself when I have to shop at places outside of Cupertino. And that actually influenced my decision in the end. I went, no, this is not about me, although people definitely bring their own feelings on things. But, if I'm representing the people, and we had people come and spoke on both sides of that issue, and it was like, no, and we ultimately did do the ban, and I felt that there were enough people that thought it was a good idea in Cupertino, and I'm representing them. So it's a fine line, but we really should be representing the people and not our own opinions. Yeah.
In situations like that, when people show up at the meetings, does that influence you?
Oh, yeah.
In particular? So if there's an absence of the community, how do you proceed with making the decision then?
Yeah, well, sometimes, so it's a couple things. One is, typically the people that are against something will show up at the meeting. The people that are for something won't, especially if the for thing is broader based in the community. Cell tower is a good example, but we did some surveys on that as well, about how people in general felt about the trade-off of better cell coverage, for both convenience and public safety and a bunch of other things versus individual impacts on neighborhoods. So we rely on the surveys sometimes to do that. We rely on just what we know about things. But that gets tougher. I mean, we just had, we went for several years about dogs off leash, so some of the hot issues, dogs off leash in public parks during certain hours versus dedicated dog parks. Then we ended up deciding on a dedicated dog park. Would it be in one of our existing public parks? No, people didn't want that. So we picked a site, a spare site at the end of Mary Avenue. And then we had, a few months ago, 40 people that night speak against it. But we still went ahead because we knew that we had done all this other work through the whole city, and that there were people that wanted it, and we felt that the issues that were brought up against it there by the neighbors were not compelling enough to overturn it. But it's tough because you do have somebody that's literally next door to something where they are going to be impacted in one way or the other. Sometimes it's just perception. Part of it's the experience over time of seeing that their concerns are I don't want to use the term overblown. Their concerns turn out not to exist in reality in the end. Scenic circle access into the back of Blackberry Farm is a classic one. And we had some neighbors there that were just adamant and the world was going to come to an end if we built that bridge and put that access. And now that it's in, it's great, and I think people use it. And the concerns they had about people using it as a trailhead and using it in off hours and all of these things haven't come out to be true. So it is good to have some experience in that so that you're can balance out those concerns. You can weigh those concerns appropriately. I mean, it was funny that one of the first nights, and Rod Sinks is one of our newest council members, and one of his first meetings, there was at the end of Bollinger there was an empty lot, and they wanted to put about 6 homes in there, and they needed to have a substandard front side because it was on a cul-de-sac, and the neighbors all came out, and the world was going to come to an end, and and we had a map of, now Google Maps, you're, well, let's look at that, and I said, oh, doesn't your house have that same, minimum front thing? Oh yeah, but that was then, this is now, and so it's, yeah.
Okay, so before you became part of the, became a mayor, you used to be a mechanical engineer, right?
Oh,
so what made you decide to go into politics?
Well, I evolved. I mean, so I spent 35 years at HP, only the first few actually doing mechanical engineering. Most of the time I was in marketing and a couple other different fields there. So I got involved actually through HP. I got involved in some other ways in community. I was doing some community volunteering, but nothing serious. And then around 1990, basically every 10 years the city goes through an update to their general plan. The general plan is kind of the overall blueprint for the city. It says how many units of housing you can have, how much office space you're going to have, what are you going to do about parks, what are you going to do about other things. It's kind of the blueprint, the high-level blueprint for a city. And every 10 years you're supposed to get that kind of updated. And the way the city of Cupertino's done it is to start out by opening up to a lot of public input. And so in 1990 they had a Citizens Goals Committee that was going to, they had a series of meetings, facilitate meetings to say, what do you think Cupertino, what should it do, how should it grow, what should it do? And I was asked by somebody at HP to volunteer to be on that committee to kind of represent business. There was concern that if you had a bunch of it was all residential, that you might, that the output of that might be that there shouldn't be any growth from business in the city, and there wouldn't be a balance there. So I did that, and kind of because of some interest on it, I ended up, leading one of the subcommittees. And then after that, somebody said, would you be interested in applying for the Planning Commission? And I went, And interestingly enough, I had applied once before and didn't get selected, and it was like, I'm not, based on some other project that I had done where it went through the Planning Commission. I said, oh, this is kind of interesting. I could help out here, But this time it was like, no, you should really apply. And so I spent 8 years on the Planning Commission, and it's a pretty logical next step to want to be on the City Council. It took me 3 times to get elected. I ran twice and lost, so it's not a slam dunk, but finally got elected, so.
I kind of have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
What kind of fueled your, motivation to keep going at it? Was it because there were some changes that you saw that needed to be made?
No, so it was interesting. Some people run for council, and that was part of the problem when I ran the first time. Some people run for the council because they have some particular passion. I mean, they go, Cupertino needs, better parks or more walkable. I ran against Richard Lowenthal the first time, and it was kind of a more walkable downtown thing or whatever. And I wasn't there. Kind of being on the planning committee was just, this is a great place. I just want to not get it screwed up, I want to, I think I can add value by kind of steering it, forward in the right direction. But I didn't have any big vision. And Richard beat me because he had a vision, and then that appealed to people. So I ran the first time, because it was kind of the logical thing to do. And I ran again because, I looked each time at who else was running. And if there were other people that were running, I thought that they could do as good a job as I could or better. And Richard fit that bill after I got to know him. We became good friends during the campaign. And the second time I almost didn't run. and because somebody said, no, you know, we need you, blah, blah, blah. And then I wasn't going to do it again, and I got my arm twisted by a couple of people that were on the council at the time, and decided to give it another shot. That's how it happened. And the difference for me is, can I make a difference? Can I make a positive difference? If I can't and somebody else can do it, that's fine.
Have you been able to draw on any of your past experiences to like help you during your term as mayor?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, mayor, you know, we just rotate as mayor, so I'll speak more to the council issues in general. I think, like I said, I was at HP 35 years, and HP as a company, the culture is more consensus driven. So, which is, you know, we're ultimately really like that here. You know, so you know, people that come from business where they're in a business where they're, you know, more autocratic and like, you know, I'm the CEO, I can boom, make a decision and it happens, have trouble when they get into government, because it's not about that. I mean, I may be mayor, but I just have 1 vote out of 5 here on the council. The only thing I can do that other council members can't do, I can put anything on the agenda, and otherwise it takes 2 council members to put something on the agenda. But, you know, other than that, and I chair the meeting, but sometimes it's, so when you chair the meeting, you know, you typically let everyone else speak first. So sometimes I don't like that because the decisions are already made by the time it gets to me. Whereas, you know, before I could say, oh, I'll start the conversation, and you can kind of start to at least steer it in a direction that you think you want it to go. And now I don't have that capability anymore. So it's a mixed, it's a mixed thing. Yeah, you know, so. But we, you know, the council, we have really good dynamics on the council right now. We're all working well together, and that's not always true. Although everything's relative. You know, you think, oh yeah, we got, you know, conflict on our council, and you hear or watch some other council meeting, go, no, we got nothing. You know? So it's a well-run city, and you know, we don't have a lot of challenges other cities had with financial challenges or mostly financial or other problems. You know, we're a pretty good place.
What role does like the media play with the city government, or like what's the relationship between like the council and the media and sort of like the news in the city? So.
Yeah, you know, I mean, so the media has, you know, again, not. So we've got a couple things. The checks and balances here are the media is a check and balance. We've also got some other. Specific citizens that really hold our feet to the fire on certain issues, which is good. I mean, sometimes they don't feel like they should have to be the ones that do that, but they'll sometimes find some real issue and drill down into that and raise it to our attention. There was something recently about, you know, one of the projects and stuff like that. But the media plays a really key role in general. I mean, the ultimate, you know, experience the other way was in Southern California, the city of Bell. I don't know how much you know about that. It was, you know, completely out of control, and, you know, council members were getting hundreds of thousands of dollars, and city manager, it was a complete, it was, if it's not, I guess it's still going to court. If it's not criminal, it's definitely amoral, you know. And there was no coverage because it's, you know, it was a small enough town, they didn't have a local paper, and you know, the LA Times wasn't tracking it until they finally got involved. So, you know, no, I think we just look at what happened with our supervisor, Mr. Shirakawa, that certainly got a lot of scrutiny from the paper, and ultimately is going to jail probably. So I think the media plays a very important role, and I was at an event on Friday for the Northern California Chinese Media Association, and in Cupertino we also count on our ethnic media a lot. We count on the Chinese news papers in particular to keep communication with that part of our population that otherwise wouldn't have the skills. And they I think they got real involved in the water board thing, the water district election, more than the mainstream media in this last election.
Interesting.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No.
Is this the World Journal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe Out Daily too, both of them. But this was Patrick Kwok against Nee, and there was some stuff that went on there that I only heard after because I don't get it. And we do get, by the way, we get headline. We see headlines from the Chinese press, and then if there's an article we want to see translated, we'll get it translated because it is important for us to also know what's going on there. But it's all good. So we have good relations with all the press, including the new emerging online press.
Any last question?
In terms of the city council communicating with the rest of the citizens of Cupertino, I guess the high school students, they're a subgroup that I feel like are very heavily influenced by, or are actually the ones who, other than the parents, actually care about the decisions that are being made. So what do you think are some of the ideas that you think that teachers or school administrators need to be kind of urging the students to be thinking about, because we are kind of getting to the point where we're going to become the new citizens of this place. So what are those things that we should be looking out for?
Well, I think you guys, I think students have been sometimes. There's naivete associated with being a student, but we get people. I've been interviewed by the Monta Vista paper on some issues, cement plant, and I forget what else. We've from time to time we've had definitely representatives from De Anza. We probably get more from De Anza, but we get students, and they have a lot of influence because it is different than the normal people that come in and speak on the issues. So when kids come in and of all ages, and say something bad's going to happen if we make this decision, we do listen extra carefully. We still don't always make that decision that way, but no, I think definitely I think students are more concerned than the average person about the environment. And we get that feedback. There were a lot of young people that came in and spoke about the plastic bag ban. And I'm sure when we'll be talking about styrofoam. That'll happen as well. That's probably certainly when we talk about any development that's going to affect the schools. And now we're one of the things we don't want to have a referendum again. It costs money to have a special election. It's divisive in the community, and we prefer not to deal with divisive issues. I'll talk about that in a minute. And now we still need to do a certain amount of housing. We're required to do that by some state things, but we're really careful about it. We spent hours one night on a new project down here talking about plus or minus 6 housing units, which is not a lot, but it was like, it was enough concern among council members and going back and forth on, and again, it's a project going to work, because there's usually what happens is there's something we want out of a project, retail, because it's good for people to go and do things, and it's also good because that's where we get most of our money from sales tax. So we like retail, and we like parks, and we like this, and in exchange for getting those amenities, Main Street's a good example. We're going to have the closest thing to a downtown that we're going to have. We're going to take Finch and turn it into a town square and do all this and have shops and things.
Is an upcoming project?
Yeah, no, it's been approved, and it's in a big empty lot along Stevens Creek down there, right, kind of across from near Cupertino High School, basically. But in exchange for that, we gave them some extra office space because office is valuable right now and whatever. So every time somebody comes in with a project, it's a trade-off of what are the amenities that the city's going to get. We've obviously got our biggest project ever coming in this year, and that's the new Apple campus. The big spaceship-looking thing.
Can you elaborate? I don't think.
Oh yeah, okay, no. It's, so just go Google Apple Campus 2 and you'll see the images and everything. So Apple has purchased, so there's all of the land where I used to work at HP, the big HP land. There's 100 acres there next to Prunridge Avenue and,
Yes.
and all that. And Apple owns all that now, and HP's completely gone. And then Apple already owns stuff on the other side of the street. And every building there is going to be torn down, and it's going to be one big, round, spaceship-looking building.
The next new thing for Apple, huh?
Yeah, and it's coming through the process, and it's going to have, we're going to see an environmental impact report and everything. But there's a perfect example where there's going to be trade-offs. I mean, obviously, Apple, they give us sales tax today. There's a lot of the reasons why hotels are doing so well around here in business. There's some because Apple employees and their vendors and utilize those services. So there's a lot of good things, but there's going to be impacts. You know, they're going to have 12,000 people working on that site, and that's a lot more than were there in the past. And there's going to be potential traffic. You know, well, there'll be traffic, and how much can be mitigated and not. So everything we do is a trade-off of, you know, okay, what are the negative impacts versus what positive benefits we're going to get. So.
Any other questions?
Well, you mentioned that there's a trade-off between any decisions that you make for the city of Cupertino. So how do you decide which way to go, like whether to do something?
You know, it's just then that's where it does come down to our individual values, and our values. You know, not in the sense of personal values, but our values of what we think is the right thing for the city. And I mean, it's, we when a developer comes in, it's like, oh, you're doing that because you love developers. We don't love developers, and we, they're bringing something to the city, whether it be the retail or some other, a park or in the case of Main Street, this, what will be our, the closest thing we're going to have to a potential downtown. I mean, we'd love to see somebody come in and do something more positive with Valco. Valco is the kind of sore spot of the city, if you will. But there, there's been a lot of good things that that have come in, but we've got a really good example, and we'll have somebody come in tomorrow night and express their opinion about it. And by the way, you can. Even if there's an item not on the agenda, there's open, at the beginning of every council meeting, there's oral communications where anybody can come in and take 3 minutes and say anything they want about anything. And some of them are issues they have, and some of them are just, again, we don't have too many gadflies, if you will, that come in and just, can rant and rave about anything. In fact, it was interesting, going back to one thing I forgot to say. So personally, I try not to have us get involved in issues that are not directly related to Cupertino. So right now I'm in a little bit of a dialogue with somebody about, should I be signing up for the mayor's, whatever the mayors want to do about gun violence and whatever, and I'm going, no. Because people on both sides of those issues, whether it be, all the social issues and stuff, people, some city mayors want to get involved and have a high profile. I don't, and just because it's divisive and it's not anything we're going to have any direct influence on anyway. I mean, we've got, we have ordinances about, we have a gun store, and they have, California has the strictest gun laws in this country anyway, and whatever. So, and I don't think that's what's. We can get off on why I don't think it's a good idea, but in general, I just don't want to, get involved. But anybody can come in and speak on something. And so we've got right now, there's 4 cities. There's a Stevens Creek Trail, and in Mountain View, they've got, they've done a lot of good work on the trail, and we've done some work through Blackberry Farm, and we'll extend that. And the question is how to get from Mountain View to Cupertino. And so we've got a 4 cities working group, Los Altos, Sunnyvale, us, and Mountain View, that's kind of working on that. And one proposal that was thrown out by the consultants was put another bridge across 280. The question for us is how to get across 280. So there's Mary Avenue Bridge, but that's kind of far away from the creek. And, you know, how do you get there on city streets? And then there's Foothill, which is, you know, not the best bike pedestrian way. And so there was the idea of putting another pedestrian bridge across there and connecting the neighborhoods there. But both neighborhoods on the north and south side of that are basically dead-end neighborhoods today. I mean, like Far Lap and Man, or on the south side, and Barranca and whatever. And so the neighbors heard about this, and they freaked, you know, because in their opinion, it would completely change, you know, their neighborhood by having beyond city streets, and you know. And so, you know, we had I've had some discussions. There were some big community meetings. I've had some individual community meetings since then, and it's kind of like, as I've looked at it now, I don't think that if it really was a really great idea, I would deal with the pushback, you know, even though there'd be a lot of pushback from those specific neighborhoods. But in really looking at it, how much would it get used? How much difference would that make for the residents of Cupertino versus some other things we could spend money on? I'm kind of like, no. So it's just an individual. Not an, you know, it's a feeling, a consensus in the end, because 5 of us need to make that decision, and we're usually pretty good about 5-0 decisions or 4-1s, but not always.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Appreciate it.